And I'm just excited to be here with all of you to share this presentation with our awesome guest speaker, Dr. Don Emmerich. So we're here today to talk about trauma-informed leadership. So if you haven't done so, if you could go ahead and basically change your profiles on your name, and that helps us out. And also, if you haven't done so already, put where you're from in the chat. It just helps Dr. Emmerich and myself know where everyone is coming from. But we are going to go ahead and get started. And I just want to introduce our amazing guest speaker here. She is her name is Dr. Dawn Emmerich. She considers herself as one of the many hurt and recovering executive leaders in America. There is nothing more powerful than learning from and connecting with people with who have lived, learned, and recovered with experiences and stories of awareness and professional application. Dr. Emmerich continues to do the hard work of detangling and acknowledging the connection between her unresolved childhood trauma and her relationships with her children, family, and friends, professional peers, members of her team, and bosses. This journey of becoming more trauma aware and informed has fundamentally changed the way she approaches relationships at home, at work, and in the community. Dawn is motivated to start a new leadership paradigm today, right now. A paradigm that starts with creating 1 million trauma-informed leaders in America by 2031. Over a span of 30 years, she's crafted her leadership and organizational development skills at various private, government, and nonprofit organizations in Florida, Minnesota, Washington, Oregon, and Texas. She is a former CEO of 2 nonprofits in a country and a county and city government executive. She has successfully planned, managed, and executed several enterprise-wide complex organizational restructuring efforts using organizational design and change management theory, employee engagement, and qualitative and quantitative data collection and analysis. Her leadership and change management approach have produced and sustained increases in employee morale by up to 10% and company revenue by 17%. Without further ado, over to you, Dr. Dawn Emmerich.
Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. I want to just first tell you that I am just on the other side of a cold. And so I'm going to try my best to get through this with some coffee, with some tea, and some water without going through a coughing fit. I think I'm going to be okay, but just wanted to kind of give you just a little bit of a heads up. And Angela, I'm going to ask for a favor, just in case. Could you go to the whiteboard and see if we can get the markings off of the screen real quick? I think we did some pin work on when we did the changing of the names. Are you able to erase those?
I'm trying to see. I don't think I can because I think it's on
Oh,
your
is it on my
section.
end?
It's on your end.
Okay, let's see. Then you need to go. Um, can everybody, let me see if I can do the erase. Oh, there it is.
Yep,
It is. Yay.
got it.
I've never done that before. How about that? Cool. All right. Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for doing this. We are recording this. So normally we do not record these because we generally try to make this a a confidential space, excuse me, a confidential space so that we all feel kind of, you know, if there's a place where we feel uncomfortable or, this is a really tough subject. But I also think that this is also a place where we want to share as much information to the masses. And so Angela and I talked a little bit about giving permission to record this. And so I think it's important for you to know that, right? Like we just want to be transparent with you. There's going to be some interaction here, but just know that whatever you put in the chat, it's going to be recorded and people may be able to see that. But that's okay. You will also have the opportunity to follow up with me if there are any questions that you may have, or if you want to talk with me one-on-one that you don't want to express. here on the presentation or in chat, you are more than happy to follow up with me on a one-on-one basis as well. But we just wanted to kind of put that out there as a professional courtesy and for trust, just as a safe environment and for transparency. Always want to make sure that you know that it is being recorded. I also want to just mention to you that this is going to be a little bit of a different spin on trauma. Many of you are working in a space where you are dealing with trauma-informed principles every single day, whether it's within your own self-care or working with, individual folks that are coming in and accessing your services and the work that you do every single day and impacting the lives of people every single day. This is a little bit of a different approach. And so I would ask for you to come into this training with a very different mindset, an open mindset of not one of I know this already, but one of, all right, I may have been exposed to this information. I've been doing this work for a long time, but maybe I need to lean in a little bit. I think I'm going to learn something a little different this time. So that's the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say is if you took this presentation or if you took, I came and spoke with many of you last year. So if you were in that presentation last year, I'm really thrilled to tell you that I'm going to be presenting something to you with new information. So I'm really happy to tell you that I myself am continuing to go through my journey. And you'll see through today's presentation that as I continue to heal and to go through my journey, I'm learning. And so as I'm learning, I'm applying as a professional and as a mom. And so the more I go through my own lived experience and application, I try to share. And so you're going to get more research and new research and really that post-traumatic growth that I am finding that I'm applying. And so therefore I want to share more of that research in the presentations as I go through this work as well. So you're going to get hot off the presses of new information. I did present this back in November to your first cohort, and it was very well received. I continue to get emails from folks who did go through that first training. So I really hope um, that you receive it very well as well. When we do this presentation, you're going to get a glimpse from when I was still in pain. It's hard for me to watch. It's really difficult for me to watch because it's 4 years out and I'm really kind of post that trauma. So you're going to kind of see it from the beginning up until where I am now. And many of things that you're going to see in this journey, you're going to be able to apply, whether it's to yourself or again, to your peers in your workplace or to, again, to the people that you might be serving as well. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and hop right into this information. So this is our community agreement, right? And so this is kind of our guiding principles that we want to have with one another. Normally in trainings that I do, whether they're in person or live webinars, we tend to do these together. We create these together. Now, I only have a limited time with you. So what I have generally done with this particular slide is that I have kind of cherry picked some of the things that I have done over the last several years, some of the main things that my community has developed with me together. And so these are things that traditionally my groups have kind of pulled together as our agreement. So, giving our attention to the person that's on the floor when we have some interaction moments, and there will be some, there'll be few, but we will have some. Let's just give that attention to people who are there and just be respectful and lift them and honor that time with them participating, engaging in curiosity and compassion rather than shaming. Everybody who's going to come to the training are going to come with a very different level of knowledge and information and awareness. Everyone is going to come with a different level of experience and worldview. and level of understanding. So let's have that curiosity and compassion versus the shaming with and judgment, right? Let's call people in versus calling people out. So these are very common things that I've experienced with people who have been participating in my trainings. And engage in our own ongoing self-reflection and taking care of ourselves and what makes sense for each of us. What works for me and in my own personal journey is never something that I would impose on others. And so, I always often talk about, the person who stops smoking, right? Like someone who has gone cold turkey always expects somebody else to go cold turkey. Now, that's not always the case for somebody. Somebody has to quit and they start and quit and they start and finally they quit, right? Like everybody's situation is different. So that ongoing self-reflection and taking care of ourselves and doing it the way that is best for us is really important. So these are just some of our community agreements as we go through this and once you're done, right? And just when you process this information when we're done, however you want to do that, as long as you take the time to process and really reflect on the information. So I'm going to show you a little video. I want you to take the time to listen to Michelle's story, and Michelle is going to be interwoven throughout the rest of this presentation. So please take the time to learn about Michelle. Turn your volume up and you should be able to hear this just fine.
America is on a collision course between high levels of anxiety and the continued practice of bully styles of leadership. Leading organizations is already difficult. It's even harder to be productive when we're navigating through the effects of our personal trauma that we are bringing into the workplace. Did you know that just under 70% of all Americans indicate that they have experienced some form of trauma in their lifetime? In other words, what that means is if you have 100 employees, 70 of them could be really going through some things, and they may be bringing it back into the office. With the pandemic, the wildfires, the murder of George Floyd, and the bully leadership in our politics these days, I would suspect that that number is even higher. Businesses are not ready. They have failed to recognize the increasing needs of the social and emotional needs of their workforce. Hence, what we're going through right now is this great resignation, right? Let me share with you a story about a young child who became a sought-after executive and who exemplifies this perilous collision between personal trauma and working for some real shitty leaders. She was raised by her grandparents, and while her grandparents did the best job that they could, she was still exposed to alcohol and substance abuse. She was raped at 17. And around that same time, her grandparents disowned her when they discovered that she was dating a black schoolmate. This childhood trauma really impacted Michelle. I mean, she really had some attachment issues, and she had this obsession with perfection. This little girl, yeah, she had to win those beauty pageants. She absolutely had to be the best and exceptional at everything that she did. Over the next 30 years, that resilience worked really well for her. I mean, she went on and earned her doctorate degree in leadership. She soared to national prominence, soared so high she busted through that ceiling and planted an FU flag right on top of that mountain. Yes, she did. You know how I know that story? My name is Dawn Michelle Emmerich. I am Michelle. We're experiencing levels of stress, anxiety, and depression like we have never seen before, especially in our workplace. Did you know that SAMHSA actually has said their distressed helpline has indicated that they have seen an 890% increase in their call volume? I didn't say 89%. 890% increase in their call volume. And let me tell you, these are not strangers that are calling this number. These are people that we know. These are our neighbors. These are our teachers, our coworkers, our CEOs. Heck, they may have even been you, because none of us have been our best selves lately. None of us. 1 out of 4 women are choosing to step back or step out of the workplace altogether. 52% of Americans' workers are looking for new jobs in places with businesses that are known for their compassion, for their purpose, and their strong sense of belonging and inclusion. I was one of those women. I was one of those women who made the excruciating decision to step down after only 5 months in a new executive role. My childhood trauma was triggered almost on a daily basis based on the interactions that I was having with my bully boss. The stress was overwhelming. There were most days where I chose to fight through it, but there became a day when I knew that it was time for me to resign. And I'm going to be clear. I didn't resign, and I didn't step down from that job because I wasn't fit for the job. I stepped down and I resigned because of the persistent pattern of abuse that I was actually experiencing on the job. Let me give you an example of the kind of culture that we're talking about that are in our workplaces. The day that I chose to resign, I went to HR, and rather than HR holding the bully boss accountable, HR actually told me their advice was for me to fake a positive COVID test so that I could actually avoid my boss for 2 weeks. They said, go home, just rest for 2 weeks, come back, and let's have a conversation about it. I didn't do that. But the bullying continued. I submitted my letter of resignation. My bully boss released my letter of resignation to the media, and then facilitated a very personal and a very public shaming campaign against me for all the world to see. My perfect career train was thrown off the track. That ceiling that I busted, I fell through it, and I hit the floor with a thud. I had fallen from grace. The public shaming was so deep and so strong that I thought of ways of trying to completely eliminate myself from existence, from changing my name that I'd worked so hard for, to taking my life. The business community is not ready for this. We see the trauma tsunami heading toward us. We see it, but we're not ready. But I have a solution. Trauma-informed care is well documented to be a very effective method for promoting healing and recovery. If trauma-informed care is so effective in the clinical setting, then it's time to bring it into our workplace and train leaders how to lead today's workforce using those same trauma-informed principles. So I'm going to give you a little exercise. I want you to think about something. In your head, I want you to think about a business that you have either led or that you are currently working for or have worked for. And I want you to make a mental note in your head every time you answer yes to the following questions. All right, here we go. Is this business emotionally safe? Is this business transparent with its major decisions? Is this business collaborative across the entire enterprise? Is this business cognizant of how racial trauma, discrimination, and culture impacts employee experiences? Does this organization acknowledge and give space to personal trauma? And does this organization, this business, allow staff to have a voice? How'd you score? How many times did you say yes? If you said 4 or more, congratulations, you're working for a pretty effective organization. I need to correct something. I made a mistake earlier, but let me just correct this real quick. I didn't fall from grace. I fell with grace. And I am motivated as hell to change the way that we lead in this country and start a new paradigm, a paradigm that trains 1 million trauma-informed leaders in the United States by 2031. Leadership is a responsibility. It is not an entitlement. You are not entitled to lead. It is a responsibility. Leadership, where leaders need to own their own trauma and heal from their own trauma so that they can be the best leaders that they can be. And leaders who will stop asking staff, what is wrong with you, to what has happened to you, and how can we help you? I'm here, I'm alive, I'm empowered, and I'm challenging all of you to come with me. Come with me and the thousands of Michelles as we change the way that we lead in the United States, that we make 1 million trauma-informed leaders by 2031, and then we're going to take over the world. Thank you.
So this is my why. And I think, so yeah, this is the reason I do this. And 2020 was the year of reckoning for me. And this is part of my journey. It's very difficult to watch that. Very, very difficult because I've transcended so much since then. So, and that was just so raw. This particular TED Talk was in 21. So it's still fresh. I actually had no business doing that TED Talk. I really had no business. It was not something that I did on my own. I was asked to do it, did not want to do it, and thought long and hard about doing it, and just kind of said, you know what? It was the first time that I had actually put my thoughts of what had happened, put my thoughts down on paper, and thought to myself, well, if I don't get accepted, at least it would be the first start to a journal that I was finally able to express the event that occurred. And didn't even have an idea of what 1 million trauma-informed leaders was. I literally was writing the application and it said, what's your big idea? I was like, oh God, I don't have a big idea. I'm still crying from writing this. I don't know what my big idea is. And I came up with that idea while writing the application. And so when I got accepted, it was just really a big surprise. And so just doing the TED Talk took me really from feeling like a victim to really owning my story. And it really, that TED Talk started the process of my healing. And so I'm very grateful for it, but it's still very difficult for me to watch. So anyway, so that's why I'm doing this. And so, yes, really looking, and I've done such a, I talk about in my story about then taking over the world. I'm not quite there yet with a 1 million, but certainly if you can look at this, I'm so pleased that so many people do turn to some of the work that I do, whether it's through my TED Talk or through my webinars. I have a variety of things that I do offer, whether it's my LinkedIn. I have 2 LinkedIn courses. So I'm just so grateful that that I've been able to do this. This is not a job for me. I have a job. I'm a chief strategy officer for an organization here in Jacksonville. This is a passion. This is a movement for me. And so I'm just so grateful that I have these opportunities to share my story and to inspire all of you to take this, take this work very seriously and to, to spread the word that this is a very, very important work. So we talked a little bit about the difference between trauma-informed care and trauma-informed leadership. Many of you are familiar with the trauma-informed care concept. This is what you do. You embed these concepts into this, into your work. So from an organization's perspective, you think about this. So trauma-informed care is very external. So you look at those arrows down at the bottom. So if you are in a direct service organization, it is taking those principles and applying it to the external service delivery. So the community, to those individuals, to the families who are coming to your organization for services. And so you're applying those principles to the external environment. Trauma-informed leadership actually turns it the other way around. So it takes that organization and pulls it inside. So now those principles are to your internal customer. It's to your organization. It's your workforce. And not only is it your workforce, so that's your internal, but it goes up as well and it goes down. So your C-suite, so all of your leadership, it's about taking care of each other, taking care of yourself, each other, and then down, right? It's taking care of your organization culture, your organization workforce, to vertical this way and horizontal. So it is the whole entire system internally. So that's the difference. Now, if you are a true trauma-informed workplace, it should be both. It should be what you're doing externally, right? And also internally. So what I'm going to be really exposing you to, hopefully over the next hour, is really just this internal leadership piece. So that's the difference. The TED Talk is a nice primer just to kind of get you, centered and grounded into the difference between trauma-informed care. It's taking those same principles and just applying it internally into your workforce. I talked a little bit again about the stats. I think that second bullet is really powerful. I think that the workplace has kind of gotten off the hook a little bit. So much of this trauma-informed, idea of that we focus so much what's happening in our home and what's happening in our community with this, which is rightfully so. It's a three-legged stool. But if we're spending 81,000 hours of our lifetime in the workplace, which is, just behind that is how much time we sleep, then we cannot let the workplace off the hook. We can't, and so it has to be a factor in our overall quality of health, quality of life, and our wellness. So we have to be willing and able and have to have the courage to make sure that the workplace is a part of the conversation. It is a three-legged stool. It's community, it's home, and it's the workplace, right? It has to be. So let's start to feel very comfortable to bring in the workplace as a part of the conversation. And so let's also now start thinking about, let's talk about our workforce. Let's talk about, we have 5 generations that are happening in our workforce right now. Baby boomers are aging out, and we've got the Gen Zs that are now in our workplace. And the characteristics of our Gen Z population are really interesting. And what we also know is that the suicide attempts increased 51% for our Gen Z adolescent girls and 4% for our Gen Z adolescent boys, right? This is our wave of our next generation of workforce that's coming into our workplaces. Okay, so let's kind of keep that in mind. Gen Zs will leave if they're not treated well. If you are an organization that is kind of dismissing toxic workplaces, it's very clear that the Gen Z generation does not want to have that type of environment. So if you know that this is the next wave of your workforce, if you know that the next wave of your workforce is really coming in, not only understanding what mental health is, demanding mental health benefits, and they're coming in with a lot of mental health challenges. They're demanding a very different culture in the workplace. So are you ready for that? Do you have the culture that is ready for that next set of workforce? And are you prepared to manage that next set of workforce? That's the question that every workplace should be really thinking about. It is definitely time for you to be thinking about that. So here are some additional things about our Gen Z that we need to be ready for. 47% said that they change parts of their personality in the workplace. This is our Black Gen Zs, right? And so this is something about the code switching that is occurring because of the belonging piece in the workplace. So we really do need to acknowledge that there is some things that we need to think about in our workplace with the next generation that is coming in. Not only this coming in, they are here. Our Gen Z population or our workforce are already in our organizations. So how does trauma, and so let's start continuing this have this conversation about why this matters in the workplace. Well, we know that there's just a ton of conversation right now about neurodivergence, right? And so trauma does change the brain. And so we also have to start thinking about neurodiversity within the workplace. A lot of information that's starting to come out, a lot of workplaces are starting to address ADHD and autism, but trauma also impacts the way that our brain functions, and it does change the way that our brain is wiring. So we have that. It also changes the physiological association between our brain and our heart. So there is this pattern here. That's when we start feeling that fight or flight, the oxytocin, all of that adrenaline is going in between that brain and the heart. That's why when you have a fight or flight response, your heart palpitates, and it's the release of all of those endorphins that are happening between your brain and your heart. When you have that stress reaction, or what everyone is using now, and now I can't even stand using the term, the triggers, right? That is that hormonal reaction that you're having. That's the brain and the heart that is connecting to have that fight or flight response. As I mentioned before, just this idea of making sure that the workplace is a part of our vernacular when we're talking about this stuff. Robert Wood Johnson does a great job. They've been studying this for about 15, 20 years now around life expectancy. And they do study after study after study and grant after grant after grant around life expectancy. So could where you live influence how long you live? There it again. It's about place, right? It's about community. It's about where your home is, what zip code, what place you spend your time. And so I challenge at every time I can is about what about work? So could where you work influence how long you live? And the answer is yes. So let's start again, continue to have those conversations. It's not just about your home. It's not just about your community. It is also about your place of employment. And so it also affects the way that we build relationships. Now, let's talk about Michelle. In this TED Talk, so I'm going to go third person again. Let's talk about Michelle. Um, Michelle talks about attachment. Michelle talks about being raised by her grandparents, so not having consistent caregiving in her life. Michelle talks about how the grandparents were the consistent caregiving, but then was disowned. Michelle talks about attachment. Michelle talks about trust, being raped, sexually assaulted, right? Attachment theory is huge when it talks about children and child in adverse situations. So, and then having that actually transpose into developing adult relationships, no question. So when we talk about attachment theory, oftentimes, and if you are, folks that are on here that have that clinical background, oftentimes we're talking about attachment issues as it relates to intimate relationships or, general relationships. Well, why is it that that has not been discussed about relationships in the workplace? There's all those things that can be transferred into being able to develop good team relationships, rapport within team building, trust within your peers, right? All of that is transferable. It's not just about whether you can maintain friendships within outside of work. Can you maintain friendships within the workplace? It's all transferable. Attachment theory is also something that plays out in the workplace as well. Can you develop and maintain adult relationships in the workplace? So let's talk about trust a little bit. So Charles Feltman is an amazing writer around trust. He has this terrific book. It's a thin book that's around trust. So sorry, I kind of warned you a little bit around trust. And so he comes up with these 4 domains, and it's care, sincerity, reliability, and competence. And so this is specifically in the workplace. But again, if you transfer that into your interpersonal relationships, it really does kind of go into those as well. So in the workplace, he talks about these 4 domains that if you want your teams to trust you as a leader, your team needs to see these 4 characteristics. They need to know that you care. They need to know that you are sincere. They need to know that you are reliable, and they need to know that you're competent, right? And so reliability really basically means that you're going to keep your promises. You're going to keep your commitments. Your staff meetings that you're going to say that you're going to have every other week, that you're going to keep them and you're not going to cancel them, right? Sometimes you're going to cancel them. They're hard. They're hard to keep. You're pulled in so many different directions, but you're going to keep your word. You're going to keep your commitments. Your sincerity, you mean what you say, right? You're not going to, you're not going to be fake, that you're honest and you say what you mean. Competence, that you're up for the task. And then care. Do they have the team's best interests in mind along with their own? And so all of those 4 things lead to one's ability to trust that person. So can you really see how that can also translate into your personal lives as well, right? Like into your friendships and then into the community, into your personal lives. And then that leads to the outcome. And all of that is reciprocated and reinforced. So the reason why care is highlighted in white is that, according to Charles Feltman and his research, is that of those 4, care is the most important. You can screw up on competency, you can make mistakes, you can cancel some of those meetings sometimes because you're getting pulled in 5 different directions. And maybe you slip up on sincerity, right? Like maybe you get caught, in a bind. But boy, if you care and you really demonstrate that you got your staff's back, that's the deal. Then your staff have your back. That's the ultimate game right there. So that's trust. So when you think about that, doesn't that kind of go back to this? Doesn't it go back to the attachment theory? Attachment theory is in the children's space, is not having the consistent caregiver. That goes all the way back to that's it. Attachment theory is about having I'm simplifying it. It's the constant, consistent caregiver that that will be there consistently. And boy, as an adult in the workspace, there it is. Care, reliability. I got your back. I got you. I'm going to pick you up if you fall. It's transferable, y'all. It's transferable. So that psychology that's happening outside of the workplace, it transfers into the workplace, whether it's children or adults. So it also affects the way that we learn. This is really important. So when we think about what's here on the right, on the left-hand side, What's happening on the left-hand side, this is so funny. When I was working on my doctorate, some almost 20 years ago, ugh, that's weird to say that. I loved this side of one of my leadership classes, and it was just talking about the brain, and it was talking about the way that our brain takes in information. And it was this concept of cognitive schema. And so how in the world would I take what I learned 20 years ago and how it was applied, to this trauma work that I'm doing right now? And it was like poof, it just totally makes all this sense. Of brain fog and just being burned out and just all this overwhelming that we all are experiencing. And it's all cognitive schema. So if you look over here in a normal way that our brain functions and look at the spigot, right? So new knowledge and experience, the metaphor of the spigot is our brain. So new knowledge is coming in and you're turning the spigot on, and you can control the spigot. You can turn it on as high powered as you want, or you can let it drip, right? So you can control how much knowledge is coming into your brain. And so new knowledge and experience is then organized in your brain. So more knowledge comes into your brain and you are processing it. And the way that your brain processes it is based on the amount of folders or buckets that your brain has already stored. And so you can see by the drawings, you've got knowledge like back in 2001 and knowledge buckets back in 2003 and 2007. And these are things that, some trainings that you might have taken, or maybe in college that you took these courses and you got all this information, or it was a webinar that you took. And so as this new knowledge is coming in, it's being processed by your brain, and your brain is going, wait a minute. I remember this stuff. That is something that I learned back in 2001. I'm going to take that information and I'm going to store it down in that bucket back in 2001. I'm going to just place it right there. What that does is that in the new knowledge, it frees up space. So now you can turn your spigot on a little higher because you freed up the space because you filed it away into a folder that you had storage in. You just folded away and you freed up space for new knowledge to come in. That is called cognitive schema. And honestly, you have that when you go through school. You learn something in first grade. Then when you get to second grade, all of your stuff in second grade gets filed in your first grade, right? It all gets filed. So that's why you're able to learn new information in third, new information in four, new information in five. It's cognitive schema all the way up through adulthood. You're just filing away so that you could get new information. Normal process. When you get to cognitive schema overload, this is what causes stress and burnout and capacity issues, and trauma plays a huge part in it. When you have brain fog, this is it. This is what you feel. So new knowledge is coming in and your buckets are all over the place. They're flipped around. They've got holes in them. And so your spigot is running on high fidelity. It's like all over the place and it can't keep up. Your buckets are turned over. You've got holes in them and your spigot is all turned on full throttle. You can't keep up. And so what happens is then your organization culture is one of discipline and one of toxicity and one that says you can't keep up, you're not doing a good job, and you get punished for this. Versus what is happening? What can I do to help flip those buckets back over? How can I help you turn that spigot down? Or why is it that what difficulty are you having with processing the information? Why are you having difficulty versus you're not able to do it, and so we're going to discipline you? So this is the state that we're in. What would you rather work in? Would you rather work in an organization that helps you turn that spigot down? Or are you willing to work in an organization that says, oh, you can't keep up? Well, we're going to put you on a performance review so that we can work you out of the organization and hire somebody who can do it. So these are the choices that we have, right? Like these are the things that we need to think about. And then we think about it affects the way that we lead, right? And so what Michelle really needs to tell her boss but can't. These are the things that Michelle wishes that she was able to tell her boss, but really couldn't. I can't take on another thing. I'm having brain fog. I can't process the information. Please don't discipline me. It's not that I can't do the job. I'm having a very difficult time processing the information. I don't mind change. I'm just scared about losing my job. These are things that Michelle wish that she could say, but can't. So we talked about Gen Z as well. We mentioned about some of the things that this particular generation is really experiencing, and I would have other generations that will say, well, they're not that special. Other generations have experienced other things. And I would certainly say, this is not a competition. It's not a generational competition. There's no question that other generations have experienced war. There's no question. The one thing that I would tell you that is very different, that sets this generation apart from any other generation, and that is this thing right here. That has not been a part of any generation except for Gen Z from the time that they were born, is this. And so, unless you can tell me what generation has had something as powerful as this that is similar, then we can have that conversation. But this has been what has been the separator of mental health issues than any other generation from the time that they were born. So 9/11, war, global pandemic, politics, terrorism, mass shootings, lockdowns, Great Recession, and all of it has been right here the whole time. So not an excuse, just saying that it's a different generation that we all have to be prepared for. Not every single person in a Gen Z generation is going to be impacted the same, but something that we definitely need to be aware of. And for sure, it is a little bit of a tsunami because it is a very large generation that is getting ready to enter the workforce. So we also want to think about, what is this design that I use that I've been really trying to help other leaders and organizations to prepare their workplace for? And that is this power of three way of approaching either your leadership or the way that you design your organization. And so let me just get all of it onto the screen so you can see everything together. So here is everything together. So this is what I call a power of three. So around the sides of the organization, your organization should focus. So the sides of the triangle, your organization should focus on people, process, and programs, right? You offer programs to both external and internal. You have processes, right? So your processes have to be really on cue. So your quality of your process, and they have to be efficient. And then your people. Your people are really, really important. Without your people, you are nothing. So, excuse me, people, process, and program. They are along the sides of your triangle because that is where the strength of your organization is. That's the strength of your triangle. It's the solid portion of your triangle. Along the middle is your structure, your vision, and your strategy of your organization. So that's the gut, the foundation of your organization. Your structure, how solid is it? Your vision, and then your strategy. And then finally, you have the points of the 3 points of your triangle: trauma-informed leadership, trauma-informed systems, and then your organizational environment. And those areas are at the points of your triangle because you got to be laser focused. You've got to be sharp at those particular areas of your organization. And so those are at the points of your triangle. And why did I choose the triangle? For all those reasons, but keep in mind that I can flip that triangle to the right, I can flip it to the left, and it doesn't matter what's on top. So I have organizational environment at the top here, but I can flip it to the left and flip it to the right, and it doesn't matter what's on top. So there's no emphasis. It's not because organizational environment is more important. It just happens to be on top right now, but I can flip that triangle to the right and trauma-informed leadership will be on top. So the triangle really represents a really great structure for this. It's the power of three. And so all of these things are really important if you want to be a trauma-informed leader as well as a trauma-informed workplace. And most importantly, to wrap all of that up, is that when you have a trauma-informed workplace, every single decision is done through a do no harm lens. Every single decision. And so, what exactly does that mean? Well, what it means is that you have a benevolent quality in your leadership. So, you're committed to an employee's welfare, growth, and wholeness, right? So, we know that word, but I always say it wrong. Benevolent, right? So we know that word. It is also a competitive advantage. It is a foundation to trustworthiness, a trust and ethical leadership. It comes really, truly how you treat people. So how hard is that, right? How hard is it that you treat people with dignity, with compassion and empathy, and that it really involves putting one's beliefs and attitudes and intentions into action? Boy, doesn't that sound a whole lot like caring, kind of like what the triangle of trust or the four qualities of trust was? It's all kind of comes together, doesn't it? Right? A commitment to the employee's welfare, growth, and wholeness. That's about trust. It's all together, y'all. It's really all together. So the do no harm is really kind of the almost the same qualities. And so the tenet, remember, this all kind of comes back to the physician's oath. When you take the clinical oath as a physician, this is the tenet that they take. One should not inflict harm. One should remove harm. One should prevent harm, and one should optimize benefits, do good. So I would ask you, why wouldn't a leader take the same type of oath? Why shouldn't we be held to the same accountability? Don't we have just hundreds of people that we're responsible for as well? Their life, their paycheck, their families pay, um, their health, their well-being, 81,000 hours are spent under my responsibility. I see that as a responsibility for sure. And so I take this pretty seriously. And I would hope that other leaders would as well. I would say this, just give you it as an example. I told you that I'm a chief strategy officer for an organization here in Jacksonville. And I've actually have taken um, that do no harm tenet, and I have actually put it into one of our decision models. So this is a decision flow that we do. We do public policy. And so this is a decision flow that I've created for the organization. And so anytime that we're going to do a public policy, we go through this decision flow. And so it helps us better determine whether we want to take on a particular public policy position, like if we want to come out on a statement with a statement. And so these are just these are some steps that we take. What is the problem and what do we already know? Which of the four strategic priorities does this help us advance? And then the next one, what unintended political and ethical consequences will this decision create? So if we take a position on a particular public policy, we are literally going through a very intentional process to say, will this do harm? Will this do harm to anyone? And that question, there it is. So I have really am so proud that we've just been able to take that whole do no harm piece and add it into our organization's process for determining whether we want to take a particular stand on a public policy. So this is just an example of how you can take apply one of the things that I'm recommending. And this is just a really good example of how you can do that. So let's continue to go. So here's another way that you can do this. So here's do no harm right there in the middle. I'm going to take you through now some ways that you as an individual, so I'm going to give you some, take a little deeper dive into an individual responsibility, leadership responsibility, and then the workplace. So now we're going to start really, that kind of started you at the funnel, started way wide. Now we're going to start narrowing down. So we're going to go fast, and the information is going to start getting very specific. So let's get our sneakers on. Let's get our running shoes on. We're going to start running for the marathon now. All right, individual. You got 3 E's. So what is trauma? You got 3 E's, you got the recovery, and then you've got PTG, which stands for post-traumatic growth. 3 E's is the event, the experience, and the effect. That's the 3 E's of trauma, the recovery, and then post-traumatic growth. So let's talk about that. So 3 E's of trauma: event, experience, effect. Okay? So you have the trauma right there in the middle. So that's the event. So the traumatic event, right? So again, you can relate this from the clinical perspective, from your work, that you may have the interaction with some of your families or individuals. So the traumatic event, and then those arrows are representing the experience, the worldview, right? The worldview of that person, that person's experience. And then the effect. So the effect is what we often see, right? It's the symptoms, it's the behavior, it's the effect of the trauma. So that's the fight or flight. That's the alcohol abuse. That's the panic attacks. Some of these things, again, since the pandemic and since all the stuff that happened post 2020, these are some of the things that are now showing up in the workplace that the workplace wasn't ready. They didn't know how to handle it. So they didn't know what to do. So you have the event, the experience, plus the effect. So those are the 3 E's of trauma that most of the time, up until recently, was happening in the home and in the community, but are now presenting themselves in the workplace. All right, so I want you to come off mute. This is going to get a little tricky because we've got a lot of people online and you may talk over each other, but I'm going to take the first 3 verbal responses, right? First 3. Come off mute and let's just practice. Let's just kind of have a little fun so it's not just me talking. Tell me what you see here. First 3 responses. What do you see?
A brain scan.
A brain scan. Oh, that was a niche. I haven't heard that one before. What else?
Organ.
A crown.
A crown.
Pelvis.
A bat.
A pelvis. All right. All right. I heard a crown, a pelvis, and a brain scan. Excellent. All right. Let's move to the next one.
Butterfly.
A moth.
A moth.
A moth. A moth.
One more.
A goat head.
Okay. I saw that too. I said that the last time. Okay. A goat head. All right. A moth, a butterfly, and a goat head. All right. One more.
2 people playing patty cake.
Chickens
Excellent.
high-fiving.
What'd you say?
Chickens high-fiving.
Okay.
I saw turtles high-fiving.
All right. We'll go one more. One more suggestion.
Boxing gloves.
Boxing gloves. All right. Very good. What I wanted to do
Also,
yeah, say it again. One of the things that, like, if you look right here in the middle, that's like a fighter jet. See the white space? There's a fighter jet there.
I was gonna say that it looks like it's flying over like mountainous terrain.
There we go. There we go. So, this exercise, which we all love, and somebody told me at the last training that this was actually a Saturday Night Live skit that they recently did. And I was like, really? That's so kind of cool. But I really love doing this because when you come up with all of these different perceptions and your first impressions, we see these things differently because we all have different worldviews. We see these differently because our lenses are all different. And so we navigate our world very differently. How we live in different communities, we travel very differently. Our experiences are all very different. And so as a result of that, the way that we experience traumatic events or just any event and the way that we react to those events are going to be different because our experiences are different. So I may have experienced a hurricane completely different from my neighbor. Our experiences of a hurricane could have been the same, meaning like my house was devastated, just like their house was devastated. We could have had the same flood, the same destruction. But how I reacted to that hurricane could have been completely different from them. And because my experiences and worldview is completely different. And so I think, again, we have to be very careful not to make judgment, not to have blanket reactions, or as leaders think that because I reacted this way, they should react this way. Or if Sally reacted this way, that Tim should react this way. So we have to all be very careful to meet people where they are and never assume that a reaction should be generalized among anyone. So everyone's reaction around the three E's are going to be completely different, and we should never expect otherwise. Here's another reason. So I love this, and I really would encourage you. I can't spend too much time on this, but I'd really encourage you to really think about, especially if you're in this space doing a lot of clinical work. If you don't know a lot about social location, I would highly encourage you to dig deeper into this particular concept. It's really phenomenal. And I've been working in this work for a long time. And in some of my trainings and more of my advanced training, I go into this a little bit more. I like introducing the concept and then really encouraging you to do your work on it. But you have two triangles. Trauma and social location is really important. Down at the bottom, it does go into a little bit of a definition. So your social location is basically your where you present yourself in terms of your gender, your race, your class, sexuality, and trauma experiences. And so your social location is how you compare yourself to everyone else's status. For me, I use this and how you compare yourself with everyone else's status in the organization. So for me, my social location, even as a 56-year-old, is poverty. Everything about me and how I present myself and how I navigate in the world is my childhood poverty. Hands down, no question. Everything. I'm so functionally aware of it. And just as an example, and I'm okay with it. I think it's kind of funny. I laugh at it, but I do pretty well. I've recovered financially. I've recovered from all of that stuff. I've done okay for myself. I still have Walmart utensils in my drawer. I go to Walmart and I buy dollar spoons and dollar forks. I probably have lead utensils sitting in my drawer in my kitchen. That is 1000% poverty social location. In my mind, I am not going to spend $100 for utensils. I just can't. I can't do it. Even though I could afford it, I'm just not going to do it. So there are things still in my life that I see a lens through my poverty social location. So these are things that guide people. So I always like really, and you think about when people are making decisions, whether it's in the workplace or how they bring themselves into the workplace, whether it's through their leadership lens or a peer or within your workforce, sometimes how people present themselves in their decision making in a workplace is influenced by their social location. Doesn't make them wrong. They don't have to admit to that. That's your responsibility as a leader to think this way. That they don't have to think like you, but just understand, have the empathy, have the understanding that sometimes people present and think the way that they think because there are things underneath their decision making that are influencing the way that they think, which is really what this graphic is really showing you. The trauma and social location is the social conditions, local context, and generational embodiment, historical trauma that are really driving the way that people are thinking sometimes and the decisions that they make. So you can really use it. I would dive into this a little bit more. Again, in my advanced courses, I dig into this. It's really fascinating for people to really do some self-reflection on this. And they're always thinking about others to go through an exercise. They don't think about putting themselves through the exercise. So I always think that it's a really neat process for people to kind of reflect a little bit on themselves. Recovery. So let's talk about a little bit about recovery. So dysregulation. So we talk a little bit about, that fight or flight. So when we're in rage, we always kind of joke, but it's true. Don't send that email, right? When you get that email and you get that heart fluttering and you go, oh my God, what kind of email is this? Why are they sending me this? And how dare they send me that email with that tone? And you just get that, right? That increased heart rate. There's that connection between the brain and the heart. And there we go. We get that, oh boy. Back away, you are dysregulated. And one of the things that have been and that was me all the time. I never made the connection between that. No one ever told me what that was and why that was bad. I never understood it. And so I constantly reacted to it all the time. And it never was productive, ever. So now, with all the work that I've done and has made such a difference. What I do is I do an elevator thing. So when I get those feelings, I don't suppress it. I acknowledge those feelings. I get the fight or flight still. I'm wired. That is me. So I get those feelings, but now I recognize it. I know that that's who I am, but I manage it and I go, okay, here they come. Here comes the heat wave. Here comes that flush. And my elevator is now on the 9th floor. So I have an elevator that goes from floor 1 to 10. And my elevator is at 9. And so I'm not going to respond to this email, or I'm not going to respond to this conversation until I can get my elevator down to floor 3. And so I'll back away, or I'll tell my partner, I'll tell whatever, that, I'm uncomfortable with this conversation. And so how about if we just have this conversation tomorrow? I won't tell them that I need my elevator to come down. I won't say that. But in my mind, I will say, I'm at about 8th floor. I need this to come down to about 4. And so I'm going to have this conversation tomorrow. So that's dysregulation. We have to know that. And so part of the deregulation or re-regulation is understanding where your elevator is and being able to cope with that, right? And understanding the consequences if you don't. And so I understand what my consequences were. And so that's the work. That's the work that we have to do, folks. This is not about the work of others. This is the work as a leader that we have to do so that we can be better for others. And that's the self-awareness, the self-reflection, and the self-care. When I think about Michelle in that video, it's not about my bully boss. There was no question that that bully boss was a complete fool. However, if I had done the work, I would have been able to manage my bully boss a little better. But I had not done the work. So it's not about them. It was about me and them. So we have to do the work in order to be better so that when we are put in those situations, we can manage it better because it wasn't productive for either one of us. So it was never about pushing this responsibility off on the bully person. It was about me not, I didn't show up because I hadn't done the work. Post-traumatic growth. So this is the new space, right? Like, so this is the space that I feel I want to spend more time in, really helping people. If we all experienced traumatic experiences in 2020, and if we all sort of helped ourselves get through that pain and all went through the journey, I am hopeful that we are all somewhat experiencing some post-traumatic growth. And there's lots of research that is now showing a lot of people are doing a lot of more leadership work around transformational growth and positive change. So 3 forms of transformational positive change around, especially in the workplace. It's perceptions of self, relationships with others, and then philosophy of life. So this is what's happening. 3 major things are happening with people who experienced significant traumatic events post 2020. This is going to happen for anything, but most of the research has now been post 2020. So 3 significant things have happened in post-traumatic growth. Perceptions of self, so they are seeing themselves so much stronger and better able to deal with difficult events in the future. Hence the elevator. So much better. Recognizing that when I'm at a 7, I don't deal with anything. But when I was at a 7 or an 8, I didn't give a shit. Sorry. I didn't care. I dealt with it. And I didn't care about the consequences. So, and then I had a lot of consequences. So relationships with others, so much more present. Greater sense of intimacy and belonging, no question. And then philosophy of life, new priorities, new people around me, and a greater sense of purpose. So when I see this research, I'm like, yep, bam, bam, bam. Transformational positive change when you go through that journey of healing, recovery, and post-traumatic growth. And so there is an inventory for this. There is research that you can start incorporating into your clinical practice as well of post-traumatic growth if you're not doing it yet. So there are 5 domains that you can assess with your with folks that are accessing your services: personal strength, relating to others, appreciation of life, openness to new possibilities, and spiritual change. So there's really great things that that you can even measure in post-traumatic growth. So again, we can really dive into this. I could do a whole process. In fact, I am doing a training on this. So I'm doing free trainings on post-traumatic growth throughout the entire year. Every third Wednesday of the month for the whole 2025. I'm doing a specific training on post-traumatic growth. So this is just a little bit of information. So if you want to go a little deeper into this, I'm happy, you can certainly do it. It's all free training. But it's not the same thing as resilience, recovery, thriving, or flourishing. This is a very specific part of traumatic recovery and very well proven, and especially in the workplace. So the nature of the event, by the way, the nature of the traumatic event is less important in post-traumatic growth than the way that the individual experiences it. So when we talk about the 3 E's, the event, the experience, right, and then the effect, the research is very clear that it's not the event that is important. It's the way that the individual experiences the event that predicts whether they're going to have post-traumatic growth. So it's that workplace is really, really, really important. So again, individual experiences matter, even in the workplace. So how I see the world is really going to impact how I experience this growth in the workplace. So it's all relative, y'all. It's really, really important, the workplace is. So that's the individual piece, the 3 E's, the recovery and the post-traumatic growth. We talked about leadership, the compassionate feedback. We spent some time on why that's really, really important as a leader. 6 principles. So these are the same principles as trauma-informed care: safety, trust, peer support, collaboration, voice and choice, culture, history, and gender. We talked about that in the TED Talk. So these are the exact same thing in trauma-informed care. I didn't come up with this. These are the same things that we did that has been around for 15, 20 years. So you take those same concepts and you put those into the workplace. So if they're good enough in the clinical setting, then they should be good enough for your workplace. So if you're doing one-on-one supervision with your staff, then make it a safe environment. Create that trust between you and your staff. Create peer support. Be collaborative. Don't hoard information and create a power structure where you've got all the information and they don't, right? Give your staff voice and choice. Allow them to have a choice in some of their performance goals. Give them the option of developing their goals for the year. Give them the option of providing feedback. It's not just about the relationship of the power of, you holding all the power and them just being the one that operationalizes your vision. So it's a partnership between you and your staff. So this is the 6 principles of the trauma-informed leadership piece. So we have styles of emotional leadership. So I'm going to ask you to come off mute again. And actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to a participant, and I'm not going to be very trauma informed here. I know, so I'm giving you a warning. I'm going to go through your participant list here, and I'm going to choose someone. Let's see, these are all alphabetical. I'm noticing this is all alphabetical. All right. Riley. Riley Volt. Are you there, Riley? Can you come off mute? Uh-oh. How about Robin? Robin Ledford.
That's me.
Yay! Hi, Robin. How are
Hi.
you?
Good.
Excellent. Well, thank you for answering. You answered so very quickly, too. All right. So, Robin,
Yes.
we are going to go through these styles of leadership. So, these are, Dan Goleman is another one of these. He is the father of emotional intelligence. So many of you probably have heard of EQ. You have IQ and then you have EQ. So your IQ is something that everybody always knows. That's like the score that people think, oh, this is how smart you are. And EQ is that is the test that measures how emotionally intelligent you are. Your IQ is said to be something that you can't change. You're either smart or you're not.
Right.
We can have that conversation. But your emotional intelligence is said that you can work on that. And Dan Goleman is the father of that. He is known to be, he is the guy. So if you ever want to know anything about emotional intelligence, he's the guy. So he has come up with these styles of emotional leadership, which I absolutely adore. And so he came up with these 6. He has commanding, visionary, affiliative, democratic, pace setting, and coaching. If you look at the explanations right there on the bottom, do what I tell you, come with me, people come first, what do you think, do as I do now, and try this. Where do you see yourself? Like if you were to look at that and go, okay, as a leader, where do you see yourself? What style of leadership do you think you possess?
So in prior supervisory positions, I'm kind of a combination. So I'm in between affiliative and democratic.
Excellent. And do you think that you've always kind of been there, or do you feel like somebody coached you to be there, or did you like how did you land in those two areas?
I was mentored by a really good board member who had that leadership style.
Ah, were you somewhere else and they pulled you in that direction?
No, my very first job was running a nonprofit, and my board member was coach. I was fresh out of college, and so I had a really good board team, and the board president was a phenomenal leader. And she kind of just set the tone for how I thought all supervisors should be. Unfortunately, that hasn't always been the case.
Well, you got really lucky, Robin. You got really lucky because a lot of people never get that mentoring and you got it early on.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that. And the answer to what you said was absolutely great because everyone should be a combination of all of this. And this is the textbook. So good answer. Yay, Robin. So you got mentored well. This is the textbook of situational leadership. Is that if you are an emerging leader, if you're a supervisor, if you haven't even done leadership yet, is that you should always strive to be a little bit of all of these, including commanding and pace setting. Even though they have sort of the sad face and the red warning signs, everyone should have some type of skill to be a commanding leader when it calls for it. And so if there's a fire in the building, you should be able to command everyone to get the hell out of the building instead of panicking, right? Like you should all know how to situationally be able to be a visionary and to be a coach. The other thing about this, thank you, Robin. You can go ahead and thank you very much for having the courage to do that. The other piece to that is also if you don't have these skills, two things. Try to learn them. And if you are not very good at it, surround yourself with people who are so that they can help you be good at it, right? Or they can do the work for you and you not feel intimidated by that, right? Like surround yourself with the people who have the skill sets that you don't have and be okay with that, right? Like don't be afraid to allow other people to shine in those skill sets that you do not have. Hire them. That you don't have those skill sets for. But yes, these are the styles of emotional leadership. The pace setting and the commanding are not things that you should lead with or default as your leadership style. They are situational for sure. Just to give you an idea, I was a pace setter leader. My bully boss was a commanding leader. Yikes, not two things that should be in the same department. And not two things that were like not emotionally together, right? Like triggering all the time. So bad situation. So these two types of leadership styles should never be your default leadership styles, but situational. You can see that the visionary style of leadership really should be your ideal default if you can, but everything else, really, you should be able to navigate through all of them. Just such a great graphic. Um, excuse me. And then finally, let's get to the culture piece, and then we will call it. We've got about 6 more minutes, and we're doing just great on the content. And I want to be able to land with some questions as well. And so culture is really, now we're getting into the system part of the organization. So culture. That red line is how you determine the culture of your organization. What above that red line is what you tolerate. What below that red line is what is not tolerated. What's important here is that that red line should be flexible. You should be able to move that red line up and down slightly, right? If you move it too far up, then you're going to have a really rigid organization, a very tight Like no one is allowed to smile. What's not tolerated? You're going to have a lot of rules, a lot of regulation, very conservative. And I mean conservative in a sense of like really tight, really regimented, really regulated. If you have that red line that moves down way too low, then you're going to have it just the opposite. Loosey-goosey, no rules, everything's fair game, no policies and procedures, self-guided, then it's going to be all over the place. So you've got to be able to understand where that red, we got to have some flexibility. You got to move it up and down a little bit, but you got to know what your sweet spot is. So what's tolerated and what's not tolerated, but you've got to be very clear on what that is so that that people know sort of what the norms are and they can self-guide themselves with those consistent norms. When you talk about standard domains, so when I work with organizations to talk about trauma-informed workplaces, these are the standard domains that I work from. So we do a self-assessment of an organization and we ask them to self-assess your governance, self-assess your leadership in your workplace, your environment and safety. How do you hire? How do you onboard and you retain your staff? What's your supervision, support, and engagement like? How do you do workforce development and then your systems change? And there's a whole checklist of items underneath each of these domains where you do a self-assessment. And based on that self-assessment, we analyze all of that and say, all right, what are some of the characteristics that you have in your workplace that makes you sort of either close or not close to being a trauma-informed organization? And then what needs to be put in place for you to be there, to be close to being a trauma-informed organization. So these are the 6 domains to being a trauma-informed organization. If any of you are interested in even looking to see what that is, again, you can work with Angela or you can contact me directly. I'm happy to share that with you. Again, I'm here to create a million trauma-informed leaders. I'm happy to share any of this additional information with you. And so these are, again, just to kind of give you an idea of what do I mean by systems. You can look at that goldfish in the upper right-hand corner. That goldfish is the leader. So we can do all this work with the leader. Look at me as the goldfish. I'm all in, right? I'm working on my elevator. I'm working on me. I'm in post-traumatic growth. So I'm working on me. But if I'm sitting in a dirty fishbowl, meaning my organization is still toxic, then it's not helpful for me. So we have to we have to work on the leader piece. We have to be well, but we also have to work on the culture of the organization. It's really important that we don't forget about the workplace as well. And that's the systems piece of the organization. And that's just basically what we're showing here. So over here on the left-hand side, we've got all this stuff that's still happening over in the dirty fishbowl. And then over here on the right-hand side, those are the 6 principles of trauma-informed leadership. You got social location that you're really taking in consideration. So not only is your goldfish really healthy, but you got clean, crisp water and a do no harm lens that, the organization is really making good strides to trying to make itself a really good trauma-informed leader and a trauma-informed workplace. Finally, this is just another graphic of how a workplace can fit into this whole paradigm of how a person who has experienced over here on the left-hand side, how a person has experienced a very traumatic event and how the workplace can be a part of that healing process and that growth process. So you can see the traumatic event over there on the left-hand corner. You can see the disruption, right? So everything that we've just went through, you can see this is in this chart of how the workplace plays a part. Disruption, here's if you go to the right, you have the dysregulation, how social support and personal relationships are really critical. But if you start moving a little bit more to the right, this is where the workplace comes in. Growth cycle, how the workplace is critical for helping an individual find growth and find post-traumatic growth in their journey. So that occupational support and companionship in the workplace, that work relationship, my goodness, it's critical. So you have a component of this, you know, so not only to yourself, but to your peers. Your workplace is critical to anybody's individual journey um, to healing. And yeah, so I'm going to stop there. And that is the cleaning of the dirty fishbowl through the systems change. So that's a great ending point to all of this. I'm going to stop share and come back to everyone and see if there are any questions that you might have for me. We have there's lots of stuff in the chat, but I have not been able to look at anything in the chat because I have been on the roll, Angela, so I wasn't sure. Is there any questions at all for me? I'm happy to stick around and see if there's anything from anyone.
I just see kudos, Dr. Emmerich, just thanking you so much. And I 100% agree, actually 1,000%, how you're just engaging as a speaker. So thank you.
Oh, thank
And
you
I'm
so
looking
much.
to, and just there's chats and comments about how they just love the training. So you're just getting kudos. I don't think there are any questions, but everyone's more than welcome to come off mute. If you have a question, this is an opportunity to chat one-on-one with Dr. Emmerich. You're more than welcome to come off mute.
And I'll be able to send the slide deck. So I'll get that over to Angela. And also this will be downloaded. So this video will be downloaded and will be available to everyone as well. Thank you, Christina. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm not seeing anything in the chat, Dr. Emmerich, but I did put the feedback and CEU request form in the chat for everyone. And once we have the recording from Dr. Emmerich, we will share that with everyone as well. So with everything, but Dr. Emmerich, again, thank you. I know this is for me like this is 3 times the charm, for hearing you. With the quarterly refresher in 23, to you being here last month in November, and then also being here this December. I'm just really enjoying everything that you're presenting, and I feel like each time I'm learning a new nugget. So thank you so much. The post-traumatic growth, like just every nugget that you are sharing just to make us more trauma informed as leaders, but not only that, but in our workplace. And yes, you are well on your way for that 31 million. And so,
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you again so much.
Appreciate that very much. And someone did put in there if they could reach me after this. So I don't know if the best way for you, I would assume maybe you could communicate out to everyone.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the easiest way, but you absolutely you can send them my email address. You know, that would be the best way probably for them to get in touch with me. But yeah, I'm happy to meet with anybody. That's what I do.
Well, once we receive the recording, we will share that with all of the MAGCOM and PhilCom PMs with your email address, so they would have it all, and if they would be able to distribute that to the workforce, that would be awesome.
Excellent. All right, very good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and sign off then.
All right. Well, thank you again, Dr. Emmerich, and I look forward to the recording. And if possible, could we have an attendee list too? Are you able to pull that for us?
I think I can do that. I think there is a way. Yes, I'll go
Okay.
in there and pull that off.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
I look forward to maybe we could do this again in 25.
Let's do it again. All right.
Okay.
Thanks,
All
Anne.
right. Thank you. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.